Hari Om.
Good evening, everyone.
Yeah.
Welcome to the continuation of the discussion on the foundational texts of Indian philosophy. This meeting will be recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. So if you have missed any of the previous discussions, you may find it on YouTube. Also, there will be a question and answer segment after the discussions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask. Please use the raise hand feature of Zoom in order to maintain the queue. If you are not speaking, please mute yourselves in order to minimize the disturbances. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Thank you, Prajwal. Good evening to everyone. Now we are continuing a discussion of Indian philosophy, the system of dualism, this known as Madhvacharya system. So we were discussing certain aspects, doctrines of Madhvacharya system, mostly some of the what we might call the theological teachings, these central teachings related to Madhvacharya's conception of God, the world, different jivas, living beings, and the relationship between them. I was trying to avoid a detailed discussion of what we call tattvas, pramanas, because those teachings, those doctrines may not make much sense except to academic students of Indian philosophy. So I was trying to focus on certain teachings, mostly spiritually related aspects of Madhvacharya's doctrines. God, his concept of God, and his place in our life, and the relationship between God and all of us, and how do we pursue this world and its problems. These were the topics I was trying to focus on, and not the deeper aspects of epistemology and this conception of different tattvas. For example, the pramanas that he accepts and why he focuses on certain aspects of epistemology, I was not dealing with them. Okay, now coming to subjects. Some of you who are serious students, especially those who try to understand Indian philosophy through the well-known works written in English, especially Dr. Radhakrishna's works, Quest After Perfection, or maybe that is Hiriyanna. Hiriyanna also has dealt with, but in a brief manner. But Dr. Radhakrishnan deals with Madhvacharya system in his two-volume series, Indian Philosophy, Volume 1 and Volume 2. In Volume 2, he deals with Madhva, Shankara, Ramanuja, and so on. Dr. Hiriyanna is a more serious writer of Indian philosophy, more of a traditional type. So, but I think Dr. Radhakrishnan is the most respected and most well-known authority, especially among writers of Indian philosophy in English. Now, you find certain comparisons between Madhva system and the system of the theological teachings of Aquinas and Augustine and others. For example, the idea of creation, very similar. Madhvacharya's concept of creation of this world by God. Madhva says, for example, it is a will of God to create this world, and the desire of the divine will. Now, many modern writers, both Eastern and Western, have found some inconsistencies in this doctrine. So why should a God who is independent, that means Swatantra, so God is the only Swatantra entity, totally independent. All the jivas, individual souls, are they are real, but they are not swatantra, they are not independent, they are dependent on God. So God is the only entity that is both real and also independent and also perfect. So why should such a God have a desire to create this world? Which shows there is a degree of incompleteness, inherent incompleteness or imperfection in God, in Vishnu, in the context of Madhva system. This is one question being asked, and very often you find this the very question being asked by modern agnostics and atheists who question Christian theology. And there is no real answer from Madhva philosophers on these subjects. And again, there are certain inherent contradictions. For example, he says Vishnu and his consort, and also his son Vayu. Now, they're all co-eternal. I mean, in the sense, all of them are equally eternal and important and immortal, permanent. So, and there are many modern thinkers who find some kind of inconsistency in this doctrine. So the only possible answer to these problems is, of course, Radhakrishnan and other modern writers don't refer to this aspect. Maybe the only reason why Madhva became so somewhat inconsistent in his doctrine of an independent God, a perfect God, and his desire to create this world, and also certain other entities, for example, Vishnu, Lakshmi, and other entities. No, there is a little bit of, there is some kind of an inconsistency. Mostly because Madhvacharya gave a lot of importance to some canonical works like, for example, Mahabharata. He wrote Mahabharata Tattwamaya Nirnaya. He has written a book, analysis of the central theme of Mahabharata. And also he seems to have given a lot of importance to Puranas, Vishnu Purana and other. Bhagavata, of course, he wrote a book on Bhagavata Talparya also. So in many of these works, which are somewhat mythological, if you're talking about Ramayana and Mahabharata, there could be a lot of historical aspects, but they're mostly classical literary works. And also Puranas. Puranas are very mythological. So even Vyasa himself admitted that he did not mean that his work will be taken literally true. I mean, he himself said that you understand the message behind. But Madhvacharya went all the way towards considering all these mythological or semi-mythological works as important philosophical canonical works. So, which Shankaracharya did not. Shankaracharya very clearly stated, that's important, the glory of Advaita. Shankara clearly states that Srutis and Srutis or Upanishads are the only eternal, immortal, foundational work in deciding Hindu Vedanta philosophy, spirituality, practices, conventions, and so on. And in his bhashyas or commentaries, whenever Shankaracharya mentioned iti Sudescha, it is mentioned in the Sruti. What he is referring to is the Upanishads. And the Upanishads, which is called Jnana Kanda or Jnana Marga, they contain the essence of Vedic philosophy. And those teachings which the Upanishads discuss, with the Upanishads expound, are universal, spiritual teachings meant for entire humanity, for all times. And they're highly humanistic and also highly philosophical, very rational. These Upanishads contain certain fundamental doctrines and teachings related to the human quest for knowledge and truth. It is not based on imaginations. So this is a very, very important point, remember. So Advaita relied upon the foundational, spiritual, rational aspects of Vedic literature, that is the Upanishads. Madhvacharya and Ramanuja, and also all other non-Advaitic Vedantins, those who followed Madhva, Vallabha, Nimbarka, Chaitanya and others, they give a lot of importance to certain books which we may consider as somewhat mythological. Do they contain a lot of great spiritual truths? No doubt about it. The Puranas contain a lot of spiritual teachings, absolutely. But the great authors of Puranas and Smritis themselves declared that the teachings of Puranas are to be taken seriously. They are considered to be considered as authentic only to the extent that they agree with the universal teachings of the Upanishads. Certain teachings in the Puranas and other mythological books which are not agreeable, which are not authentic in the light of the teachings of the Upanishads, they should be discarded. Only those teachings of the Puranas and Smritis which are in complete agreement with the teachings of the Upanishads are to be taken seriously. The Vyasa Smriti says, Sudhi Smriti Purananam Vidodho Etra Drishyade Tatra Sraudam Pramanam Syat Tayo Dvaithe Smritirvara. This is a very, very important thing. And also Javala Smriti, Sudhi Smriti Virodeshu, Srudireva Giriyasi, Avirodetu Sada Karyam Smatam Vaidikotsada. What it means is, teachings found in the mythological books like the Puranas are to be taken seriously, are to be considered to be authentic only if they are in complete agreement with the teachings of the Upanishads, that is Shrutis. If they are not in agreement with the teachings of the Upanishads, they should be discarded. This is a very important point. And this is the central thesis of Shankaracharya. That's why he always talks about some universal spiritual teachings and not some ideas which are relevant only to a group of people living in Indian subcontinent and relevant only for certain times and only in certain socio-cultural situations. But rather, the central teaching of the Upanishads are meant for the entire humanity and for all times. That this should be kept in mind when we discuss Madhvacharya system. Now we are coming to some very important teachings, very interesting teachings. For example, what is the idea of the absolute truth in Madhva system? Again, this is very important from the ontological point of view and also from the theological point of view, from the spiritual point of view. So that's what we are discussing today. What is truth? What is reality according to Shankara? So Shankaracharya or Advaitins in general, they have this concept of Sarvadesha Kala Sambandhitvam, something that is existing in all times and in all places and relevant for all people. That is that alone is truth. Everything else, it may not be untrue, but that may not be absolutely true. So that means certain teachings, certain aspects which are without any change, which remain without any change in the past, present and future, which are relevant for all people, which are important for all times, certain eternal values. That's part of the title of some of the well-known books written by some of great monks or Ramakrishna order. Eternal values. In a changing society, the book of Swami Madhvacharya Maharaj who wrote this book. So these eternal values are the subject of discussion in the Upanishads. And they alone constitute what is called Satyam. That is the truth. or what is true. That is called Sarvadesha Kala Sambandhitvam. Something which is existence or which is existing for all time and everywhere for all space. This is the criterion of what is true, what is absolute reality in Advaita according to Shankara. Now, in contrast to this, Madhvacharya also coined another expression, that is Kinjit Kala Sambandhitvam. That means something which is existing at some time in some place. So that also is absolutely true according to Madhvacharya. Now, this distinction also contributes to some of the misinterpretations of the Advaitin concept of Mithyatvam in the works of both the followers of Ramanuja and also Madhvacharya. So according to Madhvacharya, Kinjit Kala Sambandhitvam, something that is existing, it may be existence at some time, Kinjit Kala, for some time, for a short while, and also in some place. What does it mean? According to Madhvacharya, a pot made of clay is as true as the clay out of which it is made. Now look at the Advaitic perspective. Let's say there are 1,000 pots and pans and different vessels and utensils made from clay, or maybe thousands of different kinds of ornaments made of gold, different types of ornaments, rings and necklaces of different shapes and sizes and utility values. Madhvacharya will say it's all the same. Gold is true and the golden ring also is equally true. He won't admit that if you melt it, it goes back to gold. And the same gold can be used for making some other ornaments. So gold is true. Ornaments are true, but only in the relative sense. That's the Advaitic view. But Madhvacharya and Ramanuja will say they are all the same. And this is much more well defined in Madhva system, because he idredara bheda means each piece of golden ornament is eternally distinct and different from each other piece. So that's the meaning of Kinjit Kala. Means that golden ornament may remain as golden ornament, maybe for 10 years, you melt it and make something else out of it. He will say, no, the same. Now, this is an important point, remember. Now, in contrast to this, Advaitins will tell you, anything that changes in time, space, and different situations is not absolutely unreal, but not absolutely real, but real only in a relative sense. That is Advaita. That's Advaitin's view. So there is a well-known definition of Mithyatvam that is found in Panchapadika Vivarana. Panchapadika is a well-known book written by Padmapada Acharya, who was a disciple of Shankara on Brahma Sutras, some parts of Brahma Sutras. And Prakashatmayadi, who followed that tradition, wrote a very well-known celebrated book called Panchapadika Vivaranam. And in that book, Prakashatmayadi, he defined what is relativity, what is mithya, as Traikalika Nisheta Pradiyogitvam va Mithyatvam. That which is the object of analysis in terms of being real or unreal in the past, present and future. In the case of, for example, in the case of, let's say, the rope mistaken as snake. The snake is not there in the past, present, and future. Even when you are looking at the rope and you mistake for a snake, at that time it is not there. Before you came to the room, it was not there, and even after you left the room fully under the wrong impression that it is a snake, then also snake is not there. Like that, this world as such can never be absolute reality, because it doesn't remain without a change. It does not remain without a change in the past, present, and future. Trikala. Now, this is not applicable to Madhva tradition. For example, of course, Madhvacharya also has his own ideas of what is unreal. Asataha satvena pratitihi bhrantihi. So, what is mithya according to Madhva? Asataha satvena pratitihi hi bhranti. In other words, something which is unreal but appearing to be real. That means there is no real actual existence in time and space, though it may appear to have it. Of course, this is agreeable to Advaitins also. But the point is, the idea that something that exists for some time but changes again. So, and for that reason, it is not absolute reality. It is real only in the relative sense. That concept of mithyatvam, relativity, was not acceptable to Madhva tradition. That's an important point to remember. In other words, either something is real or something is unreal. Something absolutely real, something absolutely unreal. These are the only two categories that Madhvacharya system accepts. So this is an important point to remember. Which means the non-Advaita school frequently fails to see the difference between the Advaitins' concept of mithya, relativity, and also their own concept of absolute unreality. For example, there are certain statements which I want to discuss. It can be very interesting academically. You can find this not only in the works of Advaitins, but also in the works of the great Shunyavadi, for example, Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna's Bible of Shunyavada is called Madhyamika Karika, the Mula Madhyama Shastram is called. And you can find the statements in Gaudavada Karika, which are almost repetitions of what Nagarjuna stated in Madhyamika Karika. So two important points to remember. Maybe those who are beginners, I will explain this. Nagarjuna is one of the most prominent philosophers belonging to Bauddha tradition. And to give a background, in the evolution of Buddha philosophical tradition, there are two important phases, very important. One is the early school of Buddhism, which is based on the original teachings of Buddha, which are recorded in Pali canonical literature, Sutta Pitaka, Vinaya Pitaka, and Abhidhamma Pitaka. Now, in these works, which are mostly recorded writings by Buddhist monks who congregated or assembled in the first Buddhist council, maybe around 80 years after Buddha's passing away. Maybe a little earlier perhaps, because many of the monks who had listened to Buddha's original teachings were still living at that time. So it may be a little earlier that Buddhist council took place in today's Bihar state of India, in the Rajagriha, which is not far from what is the city of Patna today. So in that council, these great Buddhist monks and nuns, they remembered, they related the teachings of Buddha, which when he spoke in Prakrit, they recorded in Pali language, And that became the foundation of Hinayana Buddhism, the more traditional, the more orthodox uh, school of Buddhism, early Buddhism. And then afterwards, from about second century BC onwards, almost up to around 7th or 8th century AD, that means almost for about 1,000 years. It's a glorious period of different schools of Buddhism. During this time, four distinct schools of Buddhism emerged. Two schools of realism, known as Sautrantika and Vaibhashika, and two schools of idealism, Shunyavada and Vijnanavada. Of these four schools, the most prominent name in Buddhist dialectics and also Buddhist philosophy of the later phase was Nagarjuna. And his well-known book is known as Mula Madhyama Shastram or Madhyamika Karika. That's the Bible of Shunyavada. Now, in that, Nagarjuna says, Yatha Maya Yatha Sopno Gandharva Nagaram Yatha Tathotpattis Tadha Sthanam Taya Bhanga Udakritaka. Now, what it means is, for example, certain things, Sopna, that means dream, Gandharva Nagaram. It is just a mythological concept. When a child, for example, when he's walking in the evening, he looks at the sky, brilliant sunlight. At that time, and there are clouds, patches of clouds. At that time, a child, and also grown-up people who are no better than children in their intellectual caliber, may imagine that there is a city up in the sky because of the combination of brilliant sunlight and also the white sky and also blue clouds. So one may imagine, sometime when you are flying in the plane in the evening, you can see, you can look at it, the huge patches of clouds in the evening, you may see there are some cities up in the sky. This is called Gandharva Nagaram. So it's just something that is that can never exist even as an idea. That's the meaning of Gandharva Nagaram. A city of the celestial beings up in the sky, which can never exist and obviously cannot exist. Now, similarly, dreams also are just imaginations. And also, this world, Tata Utpatti, so this, the origin of the universe, they're all equally unreal according to Nagarjuna. Because according to Shunyavada, everything in this world is non-existent. This world in which we are living, the dream in which we sometimes recreate what experience we had in waking state, and also this totally unrealistic illusions, hallucinations that we may have while looking at the sky. We may imagine there is a big city up in the clouds. All these are equally unreal according to Nagarjuna's system. Everything in this world is unreal. Dream and waking state are equally unreal, and the hallucinations, optical hallucinations of seeing a place like a city in the sky are equally unreal. This is for Nagarjuna. A similar idea was put forward by Gaudapada, who wrote his Mandukya Karika about 150 years later, maybe 200 years later after Nagarjuna's passing away. And that book is known as Gaudapada Karika. And he repeats the same idea. So what was all right for Shunyavada, it was all right for Advaita also. Because Gaudapada was one of the great Advaitins who lived about 150 years before Shankaracharya. Swapnamaye yadhadrishte gandharva nagaram yadha tatha vishwamidam drishtam vedanteshu vijakshanaihi. That is Gaudavada, Mandukya Karya. Those who are interested, we have more than 100 lectures on Mandukya Karya. We can see we have discussed every single verse of Gaudavada's work in our lectures, in our YouTube. So, this Gaudavada also says the same thing. Swapnamaye dha drishte. What you see in dream and also what you see in waking state and also what you see in the evening in the sky when we imagine wrongly that there is a city among the clouds. They are all equally unreal. That is the way of Gaudavada. So Gaudavada and Nagarjuna, they join together in this idea. But there is a great difference, very great difference. According to Nagarjuna, everything in this world is unreal because there is only something that cannot be explained, that really cannot be called as existence. Even it cannot be called as existence, knowledge and bliss as in the Advaita, as it is mentioned in the Dvaita books. So Nagarjuna says there is no such thing as an Atman or something that is eternal or immortal. Everything in this world is an illusion, a non-existence, is nothingness. There is nothing in this world. This world, this dream, and also what you see up in the sky, all these are equally unreal. The same idea is apparently repeated by Gaudavada in Mandukya Karika or Gaudavada Karika. Here remember, there are two entirely different perspectives. What Gaudavada said was this: except Atman or Brahman, that cannot even be called as existence, because when you use the word existence, it implies something that comes into existence from a state of non-existence. And for that very reason, there could be a state when it no longer exists. So according to Gaudavada, the absolute reality, Brahman or Atman, cannot even be called as existence because it always exists without any change in the past, present and future. So in the empirical definition or description of what we call existence, it means coming into a state of existence from a state of non-existence. That is not applicable to Brahman or Atman. That is applicable only to empirical phenomena, not to Brahman. And that Brahman is the only eternal, unchanging reality. Everything else is just impermanent phenomena. That is according to Gaudavada. So remember, the same idea can be put in two totally different and distinct implications by two philosophers, one belonging to the Buddhist Shunyavada school, the other belonging to Advaita. So this is an important point, remember. Actually, Madhvacharya himself puts in his well-known book, not Madhva, but it's actually Madhvacharya's idea is put in a very forceful language by one of his commentators. But the greatest of Madhva traditions commentators was Jayatirtha. He wrote well-known book Nyaya Sutha that we quoted from many times in the past. So the Jayatirtha himself says, for example, Ausargigam jnananam pramanyam apavadat viparireyaka sakshi khalu nischita yadarthyaha kadajit api samsya anaskandidaka andakarnavrittinam yadarthyam swayameva grihnadi pariksha sahagrudastu ayadarthyamiti Badaraniyam matam. So according to Jayatirtha, this is the view of Badarayana Vyasa. So actually he is referring to Brahma Sutras of Badarayana Vyasa. So he says, knowledge, any knowledge, that is jnanam, it has got it has an inherent authenticity and self-expressiveness, which is called pramanya. So what is real? It has its own entity. If you know something to be existing, then it exists, irrespective of whether you consider as non-absolute or absolute. Again, apavada vipareha. So, all wrong perceptions are exceptions. Then there is one supreme reality which perceives sakshi khalu nischita yadarthika kadachit api samsaya anaskantitaka andakarnavrittinam yadarthyam swayameva ghrihnnati. So whatever you perceive or grasps, which may be the modification of the mind, and without being doubtful of them, they do exist, they have their own inherent existence. What it means is, if you see something as an objective reality, you see with your eyes and mind coming together, so you see something. Or you perceive whatever may be in the objective world, empirical world, using any of the five senses of perception and mind. If you perceive it, then it is real. You see something in front of you, then you don't have to say whether it is absolute reality or relative reality. So you can see the fundamental difference. According to Madhva system, if you are looking at a pot and a jar made of the same clay, you know very well that this clay pot and clay jar were manufactured by a pot maker this morning. It did not exist yesterday. And if you break it, it won't exist tomorrow or next minute. Still, when you perceive them, they are real. Because that perception is the result of mental modifications. Andakarna vrittinam yadharthyam swayameva ghrihnnati. So, because you use your mind and your senses of perception like eyes, then you perceive it, so it exists because you are seeing it, you are experiencing it. And you don't worry about whether it exists tomorrow or not. When you perceive it, it exists. Same idea will be put in a different language by Advaitins. Advaitins will say, there is a pot, this is a jar made of clay. And Advaitin will tell you, only clay exists. The clay has got the form of a jar in one context, it has got the form of a pot in another context. That is nama rupa, the name jar and the form of the jar. These things are coming and going. They are only relative, because when the pot maker made a jar, the form was made and got a name pot, or jar. When he made a pot, the form of a pot was made. You give it name pot. These names and forms are only relative to Advaitin's view. Like this world also. Everything in this world is changing. The rivers, the mountains and valleys, the sky, all these things are subject to changes. If you look at the history of creation, then you have to admit the fact of change. And whatever undergoes change is not absolutely unreal, but not absolutely real, because if you want to call it absolute reality, then it should satisfy three conditions. It should remain without any change, the past, present and future. It should be perceived in the same manner in waking state, dream state and deep sleep state. And also it should transcend all the six changes called existing, coming to existence, existing, then growth, evolution, decay and disappearance. Jayade, asti, vardhade, viparimade, apakshide, vinishidi are the six changes, sadvikaras. So this is Advaitin's view. So I think When during Q&A you can ask question, you are most welcome. Pariksha sahakrudastu aidarthimiti badaraniyam. So what it says, when the mind is uh, assailed by doubts, then the perceiver, the Sakshi, assures himself the invalidity. That means if you have got a doubt about it, then no, it doesn't exist. But if you are looking at an object, you see it and then it exists. It cannot be called relative or non-absolute. So this is the view of Madhvacharya. That means, okay, the idea continues. Asataka, khyadin nishedhataka, tad vyakhyadiras bhut nava, etc. Madhvacharya Gita Tattwamayanandaji, he continues many of these ideas. So anyway, we will discuss a little more of this wonderful idea of both Gaudapada and also Nagarjuna. In another context, that is a well-known book, it is a very famous book according to Madhva tradition, that is Vishnu Tattva Nirnayaka. There he says, Asataha Satya Praditihi, Sataha Asatya Praditihi, iti Anyatha Praditireva Bhrantitvad. So, what is Bhranti? What is, let's say, misconception? He says, or what we may call illusion. So we have to remember, the Madhva philosophers use the word illusion to what, while referring to what Advaitins call Maya. This is a very important point to remember, Mithya and Maya. Mithya is something that may create the impression of reality till you realize is unreality. So, for a person who mistakes a rope for a snake, when he is under the wrong impression because of lack of proper light, in his mind, in his imagination, in his perception, it is a snake. When he brings light, then the snake idea disappears. Look at the same rope. The same rope is perceived to be unreal when that person becomes a knower of Brahman, because the rope is part of this empirical world, Jagat. Jagat itself is Mithya. But that becomes a matter of inner experience only when you reach a higher level of spiritual evolution or perception. That is when you get Brahma Jnanam. And Shankaracharya has made very, very clear in his Gita Bhashya and also in the Madhvacharya Bhashya. That is, Prag Brahmatma Vijnanat Sarva Loka Vyavakaranam Sattitva Buddhi Yatha Swapna Dishtasaiva Prag Prabodhat. So, till a person becomes, let's say in modern language called mystic, so to speak, using a term from Western tradition, when he becomes a spiritually enlightened person, when he begins to realize that what is in him is the same reality that is everywhere, that Jiva Brahmaikyam. Till that moment comes, he will think that everything in this world is real. And he should make use of this world. You should practice Karma Yoga. And slowly he should make his mind ready for this higher spiritual evolution. And Karma Yoga plays a very important role. By according to Madhvacharya, even this Karma Yoga itself is a very high level of spiritual evolution. And also in the Gita Bhashya, there are some very, very important teachings that you find in both the Madhva tradition and also in the Dvaita tradition. For example, this Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga means the first stepping stone in spiritual life. Any person who wants to evolve in spiritual life, he can begin any time, any day, any moment by adopting, by practicing a new perspective towards what he is actually doing every day, every minute. Every action, whether it's physical action, verbal action, or mental action, but thought, all can uh, be sanctified and made a tool for our spiritual evolution. That's why Shankaracharya says, for example, Vidushaka karma asambhavajanat yani karmani shastrena vidhiyante tani avidusho vikida idi bhagavato vinishayaka. That is a statement from Gita Bhashya by Shankaracharya in second chapter. What it says is, for those who are not highly evolved, for them, they have to practice karma yoga. But those who are highly evolved, spiritually evolved, they need not practice karma yoga, because they need not practice any karma. The karma in this context means any action that we do with a definite purpose. I am doing this kartrutva bodha and I want this benefit, bhoktrutva bodha. So this idea of, well, I am doing this work and I want to enjoy the fruits of this work. This is not possible for a highly evolved person, for the highest Brahmajnani. For an over Brahman, it is impossible to do any work with a strong, selfish identification. I am doing this and I want the full benefit of this. It is impossible for a Shankaracharya, for a Sri Ramakrishna or Vivekananda or a Christ for the matter, or Buddha, anyone for the matter. That we can find in the life of many great people. Not necessarily in Vedantic tradition alone. In any great spiritual person, in any tradition who has reached the highest level of spiritual enlightenment, he won't be able to practice selfishness or self-identification and a strong desire to enjoy the fruits for himself or herself. It is impossible for a highly evolved person. So, Vidushaka karma asambhava vajanat. Karma here means action, not just action alone. Action with a strong sense of self-identity. I am doing this. And also, I want the full benefit of this. With this, if you do something, that is called karma in Advaitic tradition. And that karma is impossible for a Vidushaka, for a person of spiritual enlightenment. This is Shankara's view. This is totally opposed to Madhvacharya's view. Madhvacharya says no. He says this is not correct, he says. This karma yoga itself is a sign. It is a proof that a person has reached the highest level of spiritual enlightenment, according to Madhvacharya. Shankaracharya. But remember, here again, there is a great difference with regard to the way both of them look at karma. And this is a very important point to remember. Shankaracharya came at a time when ritualists who emphasized this self-identified karma as the only thing to be learned from the Vedas. They totally rejected the higher spiritual philosophical teachings of the Upanishads. They emphasized that Vedas teach you how to perform certain rituals. And for the purpose of, those rituals are for the purpose of long life, prosperity, and wonderful things in this world. And human life is meant for this continuous performance of all these rituals. There is nothing higher than performing these rituals, so far as human life is concerned. And Shankara had to contradict them, tell them, no, you are wrong. What he said, do you think life is meant for continuously performing certain rituals for long life? It's almost like saying the whole life is meant to get a degree in business management, so then you can get a good job. You can get a high-paid job. That's the only purpose of human life, put in modern context. Suppose somebody tells you today, the only purpose of human life is to get an MBA degree and to get a high-paid job and promotion, nothing else. if Shankaracharya would have come in 21st century, I told you, that's not the only purpose of human existence. You can have all this, but if you feel you don't need money any longer, you don't want any of these things, rather you would like to spend your time studying Aristotle and Plato, Shankaracharya would have said in modern context, or maybe Sermon on the Mount or Upanishads or Gita. So Shankara's role was to tell these Mimamsakas, ritualists, that life has a higher meaning and purpose than performing rituals. And do you know how they used to perform these rituals? They will have this Agni and then the fire, Homa fire, and they will offer different things in the Homa fire. That means, that is, they will ask for, say, Pashyeva Sharadasadam, Jivema Sharadasadam, let me be endowed with a long life, Jivema Sharadasadam. Let me be endowed with the ability to see everything whole my life. Means, let me be blessed with 100 years of healthy life. This is the only purpose. And you perform these rituals, chanting these mantras, these sacred prayers. That's the only purpose of human life. Shankaracharya came in 8th century, said, no, you are wrong. There's higher meaning in human life. Suppose you don't want any more money, any more wealth, then why should you perform rituals just for getting more money? Rather you look for something higher. So, but then this historical context is totally neglected by Madhvacharya. So Madhvacharya says, Karma Yoga means practicing rituals, actions without a selfish purpose. That itself is the highest sign, proof of a person who has attained spiritual perfection. So, and according to him, he says, Madhvacharya looks upon this Karma Yoga itself as the right kind of wisdom, mean knowledge and action. And of course, he refers to the well-known statement in the Gita, Karmanaivahi samsiddhim masida janaka dekha loka sangrahamevapi sampasyan kartum arhati. So, Janaka was a great king who lived in ancient times. He was a highly enlightened person. So whatever he did, he naturally did without any selfish purpose because he was an enlightened person. An enlightened person, he won't be doing anything with a selfish motive. So that's a natural characteristic of a spiritual enlightenment, a man who has achieved the highest spiritual enlightenment. But Madhvacharya considered this itself as the highest goal. And this itself as a sign of the highest spiritual perfection. Shankaracharya said, for a beginner, slowly we must practice unselfishness, dedication, sanctity. When we do this, what happens is our mind becomes pure, our mind progresses in spiritual evolution. Karmanishthayaha chitta suddhidvarena purushartha heduttam na swadandrena jnananisthatu swadandrena purushartha heduhu anyana apeksha. Jnananisthatu swadandrena purushartha heduhu anyana apeksha. He says, the highest spiritual enlightenment will take you to moksha. But when you practice this unselfish action, in other words, whatever we do in our everyday life, do that without any selfish motive. Then life itself, normal human life activities themselves become means for spiritual progress, which eventually will take us to the highest spiritual enlightenment. The Madhvacharya was not fully in agreement with this. So, according to him, this Karma Yoga itself is Nivritti Marga. And the performance of rituals alone is Pravritti Marga, kind of hedonism. Anyway, so we will discuss this later, and during Q&A you are most welcome to ask questions. It's an interesting discussion. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And that was a cliffhanger where you left us. So coming attraction is very, very intriguing. I am waiting for hands either on the Zoom or on the YouTube live chat, and I don't see any yet. But I'll keep looking. In the meantime, I'll ask a question. You've often referred to the moral imperative being universalized in Advaita Vedanta because of, well, variety of reasons, but fundamentally because of the existence of the Atman. So my question is that in Madhvacharya's Dvaita system, how is the ethical philosophy articulated so that it's similarly universalized or not? Because without a sense of, at least in humankind, the existence of the Atman, then how is it imperative that we have the highest possible ethical philosophy?
Yeah. Unfortunately, in Madhva system accepted a moral philosophy which somewhat lopsided and limited and restricted in many ways. First of all, Vishnu is the highest God. That's not very different from saying what my religion teaches alone is correct, everything else is wrong. Of course, remember, Madhvacharya did not articulate with any emphasis any negative views about other deities. That should be remembered. But this emphasis on his own idea of God, and again that God creating this world, and everything depends upon His grace, and the grace depends upon accepting His idea as the only ultimate thing, and again bringing a feminine deity as the consort of that God. So there's little something which may not be called universal in that sense. Again, the idea of eternal damnation, which is certainly not a very wonderful ethical philosophy. So how can a compassionate God condemn a group of people to be eternally condemned to live in hell? Nitya Naraga Siddhanta. And then again, how can this distinction and differences be eternal? And how can this coexist with all these, the world, different objects in the world, different living beings, and this God, all coexisting? And along with this, this idea of this eternal damnation. So, on the one hand, we should admit that Madhvacharya's followers and those who followed his tradition were very, very sattvic kind of people in their own way. They never practiced any violence or anything, any kind of persecution or any kind of evangelical outreach. I mean, they were not zealots. But the point is, philosophy itself leaves a lot to be desired, especially in terms of its moral imperative. So that's an important thing. I think in the entire spectrum of Indian philosophical tradition, this is the only system that articulates the idea of this eternal damnation. So I don't think it's very anything very impressive about it.
If I may follow up, I do see hands, but if I may follow up quickly, this becomes a very, very hot issue in Western philosophy because of, mostly because of Heidegger and the successors to Heidegger, like the existentialists and Sartre, and their moral posture, is, it does play out very much in the way that you describe in Indian philosophy. In the West, the same issues come up philosophically. So it becomes a vital issue in terms of world history and the behaviors of people when they follow these philosophies. That's why I asked the question.
No, that's true. That's true. I think a revolt against any such narrow idea of humanity will take the form of a revolt against God himself in Western tradition. That's a problem. So one may put the whole blame on religion and philosophy just because of one wrong interpreter. But here you find there are many scholars who refuted Madhvacharya and many of his doctrines. So that's an important thing to remember. See, one can differ from him without revolting against the very foundation of religion and spirituality. That liberty existed in Indian tradition. So Martin Luther, he denied anything mystical. He denied the existence of mystical experience. He could have revolted against the selling of indulgences without rejecting the great saints. The teachings of the great saints of Christian tradition, they are great, the source of spiritual inspiration for humanity. You can find whether Saint Francis of Assisi associated with the city indirectly, of course, Saint Teresa of Avila, the great mystics of Philokalia. They continue to be great sources of inspiration for any spiritual seeker, any tradition. But Luther would not have anything to do with them. But here, Madhvacharya brought this eternal damnation doctrine. But those who criticized him for that, they did not reject the teachings of the great mystics and saints who followed in his own tradition. There were great mystics and saints in Madhvacharya's own tradition. I told you earlier, Vyasatirtha, one of the greatest dialecticians, he wrote Nyayamrita, which prompted Madhusudan to write Advaita Siddhi. The same Vyasatirtha was the one who inspired the greatest of the grandsire of South Indian school of music, devotional music, Virendradasa. So you can imagine. So I wish Luther had revolted against selling of indulgences without rejecting the saints. Yeah.
The background of tolerance is key.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah. Shay, yeah. Most welcome.
Shay, you're next.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Please continue, Shay. Yeah.
Hello, Maharaj.
Yeah. Please,
Thank you for this wonderful.
Most welcome.
Yes, appreciated this discussion on truth, which is also, a major topic in Western philosophy too, like epistemology and truth. So, my question, one thing I don't understand about the, Vaishnava tradition or the more devotional sects of Hinduism is this focus on personality. Like God has a personality.
Yeah.
And not just that God exists and not just that he's all good, but that he has this specific personality. So if he worships Narayana or Krishna, you're not just that it's all good qualities, but that God has this sort of a person of some kind. Yeah. Like Krishna stole the butter and was playful and all these things. Yeah. So in these systems, is that personality set in stone? Is that personality eternally true? Is that personality, what is the nature of truth with this personality?
Yeah, you are right actually. So the only way I can answer your question is referring to Advaita. Advaita, Shankaracharya's Advaita, does not reject personality, but goes beyond that. Because in true spirituality, you don't have to reject anyone. You may go beyond that. If somebody tells you, you chant this name, holy name, this is the only way for your spiritual salvation, then there's a problem. But if somebody tells you, you practice this, but there are many other ways, this is not the only way, then you can accept him. So Shankaracharya wrote very moving devotional poetical works on all conceivable deities of Hindu tradition. But he also said these are different means for going beyond all of them. All these are different names all these personalities are different metaphors. These are different means for you to go beyond them. So the purpose of worshipping God as a personality is eventually to transcend that personality. So at the beginning, you need some kind of anthropomorphism. Means you bring a deity to the level of a human being, because otherwise, the danger. One may think, well, this is the teaching of God, and God has no form. And then he may say, and this is what you should do. Where did you get it? You see, one person knew this some 2,000 years ago, some thousands years ago, and he alone, he said that. One may ask the question, yes, but I'm not willing to accept him. If you're not willing to accept him, you're totally wrong. That's a problem of not having any kind of anthropomorphism. So anthropomorphism in an exalted way is a great help for every spiritual seeker. This is a very important point to remember. People who are against the idea of personalized God, if it's okay if he's a Buddha can say, you don't have to bring God to the form of a human being. But how many Buddhas are there? It's an important point. So we need a role model. That person himself is not God, but the person is a metaphor for many of these divine qualities that we want to practice and experience in our life. And many of those qualities you can find in this person's life, in this personality's life. So he opens a road for you to follow. This is a very important point. Suppose, let me ask the question. Suppose, just give you are a Christian, assume you follow, let's say you look upon Christ as an example of spirituality. You read his teachings. You may even meditate on him. And there is very little chance that you become a very violent person if you meditate on Christ, if you read about Christ. Why? Because Christ himself was not a very violent person. He was a symbol of many of the qualities that normally we call spiritual qualities. Now, without a Christ, how can you, without conceiving a human? I'm not bringing that he's the only Son of God, and I don't come to that. That's a different matter, I don't want to go to those theological doctrines. But think of a man like Christ who lived in this world. He practiced many of the qualities that we would like to see human beings practicing in this 21st century. We also would like to practice. Whether he lived or not, if anybody practices those qualities, that person will become certainly a good human being. At least he won't be a problem to the world, let us say. So here you can see the importance of anthropomorphism in spiritual life. Okay, on the other hand, you remove the form of Christ, the Christ story from Christianity, and you believe in all those doctrines, you'll find it very difficult for common people to actually practice or focus on them. So, Krishna belongs to the same category, Rama, Krishna, or anyone for the matter. Again, the Krishna that we know today, all the stories may not be accurate. Remember, the Shankaracharya would have nothing to do with these stories. Remember very well. Look at Shankara. He accepted all of them, but did not worry about those stories. He never bothered about them. And whenever he refers to Krishna, Vasudeva, Paramatmani, in the Bhakti Yoga 12th chapter commentary, when Shankaracharya used the word Mai Vasudeva, Vasudeva is the name of a synonym of Krishna. Paramatmani, Paramatman, the supreme divine principle present in all of us. So he equated the anthropomorphic Krishna to the non-anthropomorphic Atman, Paramatman, supreme Atman. Just imagine. So it is possible for you to relate an anthropomorphic personality to a non-anthropomorphic all-pervading reality. That is possible Christianity also. Okay? That's why anthropomorphism is totally unavoidable in spiritual life. Otherwise, it may be just a deception. People will tell you, I don't believe in religion, I believe in spirituality. You look closely, observe him. Is he living like a Jesus Christ or a Saint Francis of Assisi? Then you can accept him. He may be rejecting religion out of laziness or just as part of self-deception, because religion as such demands certain practices, rituals, self-disciplines and so on. He's too lazy to practice them. So he says, I believe in spirituality, not in religion. I believe in air, I believe in space, I believe in water. What's the use of that? So it becomes just a word, and it became a trap also. So that's why in Hinduism, the stories of Krishna are only metaphors. Remember, many of the great exponents of Bhagavata Purana or Advishnu Purana, all these stories related to Krishna, they do often remind the audience these are stories meant to teach you a higher philosophy that is behind the story. Let's say, for example, the Christ parables. The parables do have a meaning. Remember. So like that, all these stories are just parables. Of course, there are traditions, religious cults and groups who focus on the literal meaning of these stories. But Shankaracharya never bothered about that. He absorbed all of them and he went beyond the anthropomorphism. That's an important thing to remember. If you begin with anthropomorphism, nothing wrong. But if you end with anthropomorphism, there is always a possibility of fanaticism and exclusivism. That's why Advaita takes you beyond anthropomorphism to the transpersonal, to the impersonal. Impersonal is not non-personal, transpersonal, going beyond, not rejecting. Thank you for the question. Yeah.
I think more people have questions, so I don't want to go too far. It's just, This is something that I get stuck on, right? Is because, yes, these personal images like believing in Christ or Krishna, they're wonderful and they bring people in a good place, but also they bring some people in a bad place. They get so attached to these images and they don't necessarily do good actions around that attachment.
No, actually, those who have a deep spiritual attitude will not be stuck by this attachment. But also there are stories of great saints, but men and women who practice these rituals and who practice this attachment. For example, among Sri Ramakrishna's devotees, there was an old lady. Her son passed away and she was alone. But then she had read about Krishna as a child. So she meditated upon. There are many such stories, more than one in India, different provinces in India. And this lady looked upon God as child Krishna because her own child passed away. She was a widow, staying alone in a big home. So she meditated. She read all these books, she meditated. So the Krishna becomes a reality for her. That's a realm of experience that cannot be discussed in a classroom, to be very frank. So there is another dimension of a spiritual journey, which is deeply personal. The only way to verify is, does this experience reflect in that person's life? That lady became like a mother for everyone who went to her. Even Sri Ramakrishna looked upon her son. See. Now, so if meditation on a personalized God idea makes you a great saint, then that's certainly wonderful. But here remember, the object of meditation should be understood properly. The person on whom you meditate should be a compassionate, a genuine spiritual, model. Otherwise there is problem. Because empty doctrines can turn a human being into a beast without the help of a role model anthropomorphic personality. There are many examples in this world. You just conceive some kind of imaginary something and you say that's your special prerogative to have that experience, and that person told you to do something, and he told me that if you he told you that if the other person didn't take you completely, just listen to you, he'll have to pay the price, face the consequences. There's a problem in that kind of tradition. On the other hand, but tomorrow if one person comes to you and tells you, well, I had a vision, the angel came to me, somebody came to me, told me, gave me some great teachings, and then you behave in your words, in your actions, you became a saintly person, you're compassionate towards everyone, you're kind-hearted towards everyone, you are tolerant, you become almost like a Christ, then that experience has a spark of genuine spirituality. This is a very important point, remember. This is a very important point. So people who criticize anthropomorphism or personalization of God idea, they should understand this very well. Does it create in all of us a genuine spiritual personality, spiritual attitude? We know what is spirituality, more or less, but we also know what is not spiritual, more or less, Here again, more or less. If somebody is compassionate, kind-hearted, genuine, very broad-minded, kind, in all respects, all the qualities normally we expect in a good human being, and if that person tells you, I got all these qualities because I meditated upon this idea of God, you accept him. You don't have to accept his God idea, but you accept him as a genuine spiritual person. This may not happen without the help of a personalized God idea. It is possible, but doesn't happen for everyone. In the Gita, in the 12th chapter, Lord Krishna says, those who have this body consciousness, that's the beginning of the Gita, 12th chapter, Bhakti Yoga. Those who have a strong sense of body consciousness, they interpret themselves as a body-mind complex, then they cannot practice spirituality without the idea of another body-mind complex, a personality, an ideal personality. But if you reach a higher level of spiritual evolution where you can think of spirituality without a living human role model, it's perfectly okay, but it's not possible for everyone. Kleshodhigarastesham avyaktasakta chedasam avyaktahi gadid dukkham dehavadbhi bhasri. In the 12th chapter, you can find the beginning, Bhakti Yoga. Klesha adhigadarastesham. There's a lot of pain, lot of difficulty if you're practicing spirituality without the help of a personalized God idea. That is very important.
Thank you, Thank you very much.
Yeah. Again, I have to remember, that is the importance of the saints idea in Christianity. I forgot, this is very important. Because the mystics and saints of Christianity have played a very important role in preserving the spiritual dimension of Christianity. What is Bobby, what's your opinion? It's a very good discussion.
The traditions that go transcendentally beyond name and form still make references to great figures in the dissemination of these ideas, the guru lineage. There's always that element that helps connect the dots, that helps us with our efforts to transcend the physical. So it's always there, and it's helpful when it's helpful, and it's harmful when it's harmful.
Next question.
There are two hands up from, thank you very much, Shay. There are hands up from David and also Sanjay.
Yeah.
ahead,
Hello. I had a question about kind of the reverse sort of prejudice. Was that I heard that Bharat Maharaj of the Ramakrishna order, Bharat Maharaj, I heard that he never went to the shrine. He was a very staunch Advaitin.
Yeah.
That sounds like kind of like the reverse prejudice.
Yeah.
Could you talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, one may not, when you reach a level of Advaitic experience, you may not feel the need to go to a temple. But you can easily judge. Bharat Maharaj always encouraged, because I have myself met him many times in Belumat. So, he was a role model, a monk of an exalted order. In his life, he showed a remarkable level of humility, universal compassion, understanding. But he never talked to anyone against going to temple. This is a very important point. So you transcend it, but you don't reject it. So the transcendence aspect is very important in Advaita. Great exponents of Advaita like Shankaracharya, he had a much bigger mission in this world. Because so, along with this emphasizing this transcendental idea, he also emphasized the need for going to temples, chanting, reciting devotional hymns. In fact, his system is a kind of is an education complex which contains a university, a kindergarten, a school, a college, everything. But individual great monks who have reached Advaitic experience, normally they never reject or never discourage anyone engaged going to temples. That you can easily find. I gave the same principle I mentioned earlier. Martin Luther's problem was, he felt it was necessary to reject sainthood to emphasize his doctrine. He can transcend it, but there's no need to reject anyone. That's an important point. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Swami.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sanjay. Thank you.
Maharaj, thank you so much. Today's talk was wonderful, especially the reference to the anthropomorphic way. Now, so for me, the Nitya Naraka is the one which I don't agree with at all. Yeah. But that's more of a comment. But I'm now, after having read Upanishads and everything, as you said, the mention of Bharat Maharaj, I don't think, the way I've come to conclusion is that is probably the next Janma or one after that. It's a journey in a way. So I'm now, after all the confusion, I'm beginning to see the importance of the anthropomorphic as a way to connect, especially with human-like and the bhava, as it said, who we meditate upon. So my question now is, when Shankaracharya wrote about Saundarya Lahari, which is so beautiful, and even Kanakadara Stotram, and even Narasimha Karavalamba Stotram, and all of those things, as much as it's so, what was he trying to communicate in that for the importance of anthropomorphic way? What was he trying to say? What is he guiding?
Yeah.
Because for me, Bharat Maharaj is probably not possible in this Janma or even next Janma. They are highly elevated. And just on the side comment, that's the comment you said, I'm religious, I'm spiritual, not religious. It's common everywhere. So I think if you can guide us on what Shankaracharya communicates through that, what is the anthropomorphic?
So that's true.
In
So when Shankaracharya was born in 8th century, there were many cults and groups and organizations and different orders of monks, not so well organized, not so well systematized. So what he did, out of these, he formed 5 important deities, Panchadevada Puja it is called. So Adityam Pigam Vishnum Gananatham Maheshwaram Panja Yajnavaro Nityam Grihastha Pancha Pujiyet. There were so many deities, so many practices, so diverse and mind-boggling diversity. So what he did, he developed these 5 anthropomorphic concepts. For example, one is Aditya, that's not very common but very rare. Ambika, God conceived as a divine feminine. Then Vishnu, then Ganesha, then Shiva, and so he Aditya, Ambika, and Vishnu, Gananatham, Panchayajna Paro Nityam. So every grihastha, every householder should practice this puja in his home. It is an attempt to bring some kind of an order in a highly chaotic spiritual landscape, religious landscape that he found himself in 8th century. And also he formed 6 denominations, that is Saivam, Vaishnavam, Shaktam, Sauram, Kaumaram, and so on. So the main purpose of writing all these devotional poetical works was to to help devotees to chant these hymns. And in each hymn you find, especially in the well-known one, Shivananda Lahari, Ananda Lahari, Saundari Lahari, not in Kanagadhara. Kanagadhara is a special purpose. He just he went as a little boy. He went to it was part of the performance, the ritual that he should go on for alms to some neighboring homes. And in one place he found a widow who was very poor. So he wanted to pray to Divine Mother Lakshmi to eradicate the widow's poverty. So it was a outpouring of compassion of a young little child when he saw that humble widow doesn't have anything else to offer to him except a small little gooseberry or whatever. So the point is, but in other stotras, hymns, you find there's a gradual evolution from Dvaita through Visishta Dvaita towards Advaita. So first, at the beginning, the devotees visualizing a personalized God idea as a mother or maybe Shiva or Vishnu. And then eventually he is experiencing the presence of that deity within him as a divine spark. That is from anthropomorphic to non-anthropomorphic. There is an evolution from personal to impersonal or transpersonal. Each of these well-known hymns or examples are helps for devotees to begin with Dvaita, then through Visishta Advaita, and eventually to reach Advaita. That's the genius of it. Because he came as an epoch maker. He had to leave behind a great heritage for people of different walks, different levels of spiritual evolution to follow. A man like Paul Brandon living in New York found something in his teachings. A humble devotee going to a temple anywhere else can also find an inspiration. Even pure intellectual seekers also find a great inspiration in some of his great teachings, because it was so universal. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay. If there's a bit more opportunity, C. Gopinath would have a last question.
Please.
Swamiji, namaskar.
Namaskar.
I don't have a question, but I had a comment.
Yeah.
I remember reading about Ramana Maharishi.
Yeah.
That when a devotee came and said to him, I worship Krishna, is that okay? He would say, yes, that's good, continue. Or if somebody came and said, I go to the temple every Friday and I break a coconut and chant Ram's name, is that okay? He would say, yes, that's good, continue.
Yeah.
Because he felt that was the level at which they were.
Yeah.
But if someone came and said, I have been going to the temple and I'm still not very happy with my progress, then to them he would recommend Madhvacharya and he would recommend other practices. So he recognized people at different levels of their spiritual beliefs.
Exactly.
And would support them in that.
Exactly, precisely. And so when somebody told him he is going to temple, he said, okay, but he himself is sitting there staring at the open space.
Right.
So that, in fact, that is really an example of Advaita. So you don't tell anyone that your path is wrong and you follow this one. In Advaita, it is impossible to say that. Madhvacharya can say that, That's the problem.
Right.
Yeah. Again, but remember, Madhvacharya was a great saint. He was a very saintly person. His followers also, his tradition also produced many great saint scholars. So we should respect and accept all of them. But as I mentioned earlier, Advaita within it accommodates Dvaita, Visishta Dvaita, and everything else. That's the difference. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Swami. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Bobby, for the inspiration you gave to so many by asking questions at the very beginning. Yeah. Thank you.
Maybe I should take back anything negative I said about Heidegger. I mean, there's only a question about the moral philosophy.
Very relevant. Everyone, thank you, everyone who asked questions, and also those who did not ask questions. Thank you.
Swamiji, one of the best lectures. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu. Okay.
Recording stopped.
Namaste.
Thank you so much.
Namaste.